Good afternoon, dear working group members and our ESCAP colleagues. I'm happy to welcoming all of you to the 12th meeting. So it means our birthday today. It's been a year since the technical working group was officially set up, and I would like to thank all for being very valuable members and your efforts and active participation. And then, of course, on behalf of the working group members, I would like to thank all colleagues from ESCAP, advisors and experts for their continuous support and then kind cooperation. So with your permission, I would like to start our today's meeting. So in the 11th meeting, it was our last meeting in this year to share the country experiences on the status of producing disaster-related statistics. And then so far already we had presentations from 23 countries. And in the last meeting, we decided to consolidate the accumulated information and the formative knowledge at the global process into practical, technical, and actionable recommendations to member states. So this will be done through a series of technical working group workshops, which starts from this meeting. So the workshop will be conducted online every month from today, September, to November this year. And it will tap these technical working group members, both as active participants and expert resource persons and facilitators. So we are really looking forward your active participation on those workshops. So the workshop series will comprise 3 topics. For today's workshop, we will discuss about how we can catalyze the policy impetus towards disaster-related statistics. And next month, we will discuss about determining the scope of data in the disaster-related statistics, basic range of disaster-related statistics. And in November, we will discuss about the coordination of disaster-related statistics as a business process. So before jump into the workshop, we will have trigger presentations. So today we have a pre-recorded presentation from the UN Economic Commission for Europe about recommendations on the role of official statistics in measuring hazardous events and disasters by Michael Nagy. Then we will have Dr. Abdul Muhari from Indonesia, and then Dr. Muhari will present about the draft of national policy on disaster-related statistical framework in Indonesia. So after the presentations, we'll start our workshop, I could say discussion for 45 minutes, and then participants will be assigned to 3 breakout rooms randomly, and we will provide our inputs to the policy topic questions assigned to each group. Then we all will be back to the plenary session and report back to the participants. So that's our today's agenda. And now I would like to ask Secretariat to start the presentation.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you.
Good morning and good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I would like to thank the organizers. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I would like to thank the organizers of the conference to give me the opportunity to inform you about UNEC's important work on supporting NSOs and the national statistical systems in measuring hazardous events and disasters. Without any doubt, official statistics is crucial for fact-based management of any kind of disaster risk. And we can say that good statistics literally can help to save human lives. However, at the same time, we are aware of shortcomings in the data and the need to strengthen partnerships between producers of official statistics and agencies being in charge of disaster risk management. My name Already in 2015, the chief statisticians of our region identified an urgent need to review the fitness of official statistics for measuring hazardous events and disasters. This was triggered by a so-called in-depth review, which was led by Mexico in 2014. It concluded that it is important to clarify the role of national statistical offices in providing information on disasters and extreme events. And this was around the same time when our colleagues at ESCAP jumped onto the same train and established a working group to develop their disaster-related statistics framework. At UNEC, the Bureau of the Conference of European Statisticians decided to set up a task force with the following objectives: to clarify the role of official statistics, to identify practical steps how national statistical offices can support disaster management and risk reduction, to identify the main needs and data sources, and to identify needs for harmonization of classifications, terms, and definitions. The task force was composed of experts of national statistical offices of several countries and several important international organizations which are being active in this area, and you can see the list of countries and organizations on this slide. Thanks to the excellent collaboration of national and international experts under the umbrella of the EC task force, and after a wide international consultation process, in June 2019, the Conference of European Statisticians adopted the recommendations. The recommendations now clarify the role of national statistical officers and the national statistical systems in providing information related to hazardous events and disasters within the existing institutional environment of countries. Even if the governance structures differ in countries, there are certain strengths that NSOs and national statistical systems have that are universal and therefore give national statistical offices and the statistical systems a natural specific place in the institutional environment related to disaster risk management of each country. The CS recommendations also identify practical steps to find this place and role in the institutional environment to better support disaster risk management efforts in close coordination with national agencies responsible for this in this area of work. In addition, the recommendations include 11 case studies from around the world which show different roles that NSOs have taken up in supporting national efforts to measure and manage disaster risk. You can download the recommendations from the link that is displayed here on this slide. The recommendations are structured in 8 main chapters, plus case studies and some annexes. In bold, I highlighted the substantive chapters, which I'm going to talk about a little bit more in the next few slides. Chapter 4 defines the scope and measurement framework, but here we are mainly referring to the work our friends at ESCAP have done with their expert group to draft one really important normative piece of work in this area, the ESCAP Disaster-Related Statistics Framework. With that reference, it also becomes clear that the CS recommendations are complementary with this disaster-related statistics framework. And even if both documents were drafted from a regional perspective, they are of global relevance. I will talk about chapters 5, the role of the national statistical systems, chapter 7, the recommendations, and chapter 8, the implementation in my next few slides. Before that, let me give you a quick overview on some selected, very interesting national examples that are included in this document. For example, Armenia provided a case study where they show what are the national information needs in this area and what is the concrete role the National Statistical Office has in the institutional environment, which also includes an emergency protocol that really defines the role of the National Statistical Office in case of a declared emergency. Italy provided an example how the National Statistical Institute is involved in integrating information from different sources for disaster risk management, and this project is called the Casa Italia. Mexico provided a similar case example about the role of the National Statistical Office, but with a specific focus on providing services for integration of geospatial information. Turkey gave the example on the scope of their national disaster statistics, and the United States provided this example about the US Census Bureau, which has tools that can quickly provide statistics in emergency situations. Let's talk about Chapter 5, the role of national statistical systems in disaster risk management. This slide shows you in a very simplified way the so-called disaster risk management cycle, which can be divided into the following phases: the risk assessment, prevention and mitigation, preparedness, the time when a disaster strikes, meaning the emergency period, the response, the recovery, which then again feeds with information about previous disasters into risk assessment, and this way closes the cycle. In a much simpler way, we can say that there are three main phases: before, during, and after a disaster. And for each of these phases, national statistical systems have specific strengths that can support disaster risk management. So, for example, in the phases of risk assessment, prevention, and preparedness, national statistical systems can provide basic statistics from regular statistical production, for example, about population and infrastructure for risk assessment. It can produce and provide statistics on previous disasters and losses, but it also can help in the communication of this information and integrating it with data or information from other sources. In an emergency situation, the granularity of fact-based information is crucial. For example, in the case of an earthquake, it's essential to have numbers about the potentially affected population, their age groups, gender, and so on available. These statistics are really needed for immediate emergency response. Statistics are needed about critical infrastructure and so on. Or in the case of a drought or flood, statistics may be needed about potential impacts on agricultural production, the population at risk, and so on. So these examples demonstrate that it is key to have information without too long time lags available, but also that the information can be used for regional or for small scale analysis, meaning we need some geocoded information here. After a disaster, national statistical systems can contribute to the assessment of losses in physical and monetary terms, assess rebuilding efforts, and of course, assure the proper communication of this information to the various partners and stakeholders. As in many other areas, the role of NSOs in coordinating international reporting is also crucial. NSOs can assure that data reported to international databases following internationally agreed frameworks and are coherent and consistent with the data used in the national disaster risk management. All in all, we can distinguish between core roles and additional roles that national statistical systems have. So core roles are those roles and tasks which represent typical strengths of national statistical offices and their NSS. And it's recommended that all NSOs and their statistical systems take up these tasks within the landscape of disaster risk management. The additional roles are those roles and tasks that NSOs could incorporate into their functions and responsibilities if there is not another organization already within the institutional environment taking up these tasks. So core roles include, for example, the provision of baseline data to produce statistics on exposure and impacts, to support disaster risk management in producing and communication of information, to set up and enforce quality standards, and so on. It also includes, for example, the reporting efforts. Additional roles are very nicely described in some of the case studies that we have in the report. So for example, it could be in the assist in the assessment of direct and indirect impacts. It could be maintaining collaborative sites for disaster attention, to develop and implement methodologies for risk assessment, or to provide services for linking of information from various sources. The chapter 7 of the document lists the most important obstacles NSOs and also international organizations which are in charge of producing or also using disaster-related statistics have to deal with. They include data gaps, timeliness, accessibility to the right users in the right time, interpretability of the information, statistical office operations and methods and standards. Based on experiences in other statistical areas and experiences of NSOs which have already implemented statistics on hazardous events and disasters, the CS recommendations explain in a few important steps that NSOs have to take to further develop existing statistics or to produce new information for improving the measurement of hazardous events and disasters. In conclusion, we can say that the CS recommendations have been developed in close collaboration with the ESCAP expert group and are complementary with the disaster-related statistics framework. They help national statistical systems and disaster risk management agencies to collaborate and to clarify their roles and responsibilities. And they also provided useful guidance for managing the COVID-19 disaster with official statistics. As you may have noticed, the document was published a few months before COVID-19 was declared a pandemic. And what we could see from national statistical offices in our region is that the document really provided useful guidance for quickly finding the right role as an NSO under these new conditions and supporting COVID-19 related management with the needed information. The task force has a new mandate since 2019 and is now dealing with some issues that couldn't be tackled previously. So now we are working on more practical implementation guidelines. We support the statistical operationalization of terms, definitions, and classifications used in disaster risk management. For example, currently we are doing a statistical review of the revised hazard classification that has been developed under UNDRR. The development of a set of core statistics and indicators which is recommended to be implemented by all NSOs in our region, and also in close collaboration with the interagency and expert group on disaster-related statistics, we organized in June the first global expert forum for producers and users of disaster-related statistics. I hope this presentation created some interest in downloading, reading, and using this very useful piece of work. I would like to thank again all members of our task force who contributed to the success of this document, and I would like to thank now all of you for listening to my presentation. If you have any questions or comments, you can also contact me by email. Thank you very much, and goodbye.
Thank you for this pre-recorded video. Hopefully our colleagues from the National Statistical Offices learned some from Michael's presentation. So before handing over the floor to Dr. Abdul, I would like to ask Maria to make some addresses. Thank you.
I think Puji will say something, a sort of an introduction for.
Sorry, Puji.
Dr. Abdul.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Madam Chair, and also thank you, Maria. Ladies and gentlemen, I think what we gather from the work of UNECE was the complementary roles of the NTMOs and CSOs and NSOs. I'm sorry. This is the work that went on parallel. As we in Asia Pacific develop a framework, they developed that analysis of the institutional arrangement. Now, as an introduction, Madam Chair and ladies and gentlemen, about 6 weeks ago, we organized jointly the Indonesian Statistics Society and ESCAP organized a regional symposium on disaster-related statistics. And one of the most interesting issues that came out was confirming what we have here for the last year in the technical working group. That is, both the NSOs and NDMOs are not lacking of intention. We all wanted to work together, right? First of all, we realize how important the disaster statistic is. We keep saying it over and over. We also deal with what kind of data and so on. But one of the issues that came out in the symposium is that very typical in our countries that the statistics are being regulated under specific legislation, right? Usually it's a statistical law, statistical act, statistical directive or something. And then disaster management is being regulated under separate legislation. And both are sectoral and quite specific. And that making it quite awkward, right? We heard from Cambodia, we heard from Georgia, from Turkey, from Pacific, wherever. And in the symposium, it came out pretty clear that what was missing was an impetus policy, or one piece of policy that bring together these two principal sides, the NSO and NDMO. And on the basis of that, then bringing all other agencies and governments into the fold of the disaster statistics. So in essence, for the last 12 meetings of technical working group, we hear over and over, the same issue. And as Madam Chair said, now is the time for us to tackle those issues. And in that regard, Indonesia seems to be a good example. For Indonesia has taken the first and initial steps towards coming out with that kind of policies. And I would like to suggest participants and colleagues to watch out carefully and take note, because our workshop afterwards, our discussion will be based on this presentation. And we hope that you will go away from this workshop today with some ideas of what kind of policy, how to go about it, and what kind of support would you require from one another in this technical working group to embark on this kind of policy development. So without further ado, we would like to invite our special guest today, Mr. Dr. Abdul Muhari. He is the head of the Data Information and Communication Center of Disaster Management Agency of Indonesia. Dr. Abdul Muhari definitely is an authoritative speaker in this regard, because he used to be handling the portfolio of risk evaluation. So he was dealing with a lot of data and dynamics. And I'm sure he was also asking the same question: where do I go with my data? How is my data interacting with other sectors, with local government? Now he is in a position to make order into this disorder. So, Dr. Abdul Muhari, please take us through your example. Thank you very much. Over to you.
Thank you, Dr. Puji Pujiono. It seems my task is very, seems I will have very important task in the next few months or the next few years by listening your introduction. Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for having me on representing the BNPB, the National Disaster Agency of Indonesia, talking and share about the preparation and the draft of Indonesia One Disaster Data Policy. This is one of the priority program of us in BNPB that we expect that this year it could be finalized and starting to be implemented next year. Slide, please. So this is the outline of my talk. First, I will share and explain about the background and the purpose and the objective, principle, the scope of the draft of the regulation, and what to do next. Slide. So this is the background. The government responsibility for disaster management, including, among others, of course, preparation of the accurate data that we can use before, during, and post-disaster event. And then the framework of implementing the provision of the Government Act number 21 related that we should establish the disaster-related statistical data that could be managed and sustained. So it is necessary to formulate the framework that is an integral part of the Indonesia One Data Policy as the big umbrella, and to ensure that the data is accurate, up-to-date, integrated, accountable, easy access, share, and manage carefully. Slide. So this is the features of the Indonesia One disaster data. We expect then we design that this is integrated at the national statistical system and consistent, of course, would be comparable across geographical area, time, cross agencies, and administration level, horizontally and vertically. And then compatible with the standard of the other sectors at the national development system. And of course, not only national, but also aligned with the global framework, particularly the Sendai and SDGs. Slide. Next. Okay. This is the purpose and the objective of the drafted regulation. First, of course, we would like to regulate the disaster-related statistical data produced by the national agencies and the local agencies to support the disaster management in accordance with the provision of the Indonesian One Data Policy. Here, our objective to establish the disaster-related data that we can improve the quality and the reliability so that the data could be ensure the accuracy, up-to-date, integrated, and accountable for the purpose of monitoring, reporting on development, achievement, and of course, the result of the effort of disaster management that we are doing. And then, of course, we support the national data policy as the umbrella law of the national data in Indonesia. And by having these three, we will provide the implementation guideline for national and local agency in the framework of managing the disaster related statistical data. Slide, please. Slide, next, please. This is the principle of the one disaster, Indonesian one disaster data. It should be carried out accurately, up to date. Of course, this is because we discuss about data should be the reliability and the accuracy should be can be ensured, and the implementation should be guided by the principle of one disaster data standard, one disaster metadata, one disaster master reference, and one disaster data portal. So the one disaster data standard, including the concept, definition, classification, measurement, and units. One disaster metadata, including statistical activity of metadata, variable metadata, and indicator metadata. One disaster master reference, a common code to serve as the reference among stakeholders in conducting data collection, compilation, analysis, sharing, and utilization. I would like to give an example. In 2018, yesterday we we just having a commemoration of 3 years Palu earthquake. Some say Palu earthquake. The other institution probably say Palu and tsunami disaster. Some other agency may say triple disasters, earthquake, tsunami, liquefaction. So here we can see that a common code to identify the event that could be used to bridge the whole data owned by the different related institution is necessary to make things clearer and to put the data together at one agreed reference. And then the preparation of one disaster data portal. So this also very important in order to manage and to implement the sharing data policy among the government institution and also the other entities. Slide, please. This is the scope of the regulation, general principle, purpose and scope, authorities and responsibilities, administrator and management, type, standard, master reference and metadata, public and institutional participation, and then the last training, monitoring and assessment. Also the evaluation. Slide, please. The authority and the responsibility, of course, BNPB play a role in carrying out the Indonesian One Disaster Data Management as integrated and coordinating the process and establish the forum for disaster-related data, which member can come from the related governmental institution, organization, non-governmental organization, community, and so on. And then preparing working mechanism, socialization, and advocating the Indonesia One Disaster data to national and local agencies, and carrying out the training, also the establishment of the Indonesian One Disaster data, monitoring and evaluation of its implementation at the national and local agency. Also, the BNPB, the National Disaster Agency, has the authority to manage the Indonesian One Disaster data within the internal of the agency, coordinating the implementation with the national agency and local agencies, and compiling and determining the structures and mechanism for implementation. Slide, please. This is several implementing agency listed on the draft of the policy: steering committee, implementation committee, data producers, data custodian, BNPB data custodian, the Indonesian One Disaster Data Forum, data advisors, SDBI Secretariat. SDBI stands for the Indonesian One Disaster Data. And at the subnational or local level steering committee, local implementing committee supporting data producers, local level data producers, because most of the data we own at the National Disaster Management Agency coming from the report of the local disaster management agency. So the existence and the presentation of the national and local level within this implementing agency is crucially important. Next slide, please. So this is the implementation rules at the draft of the policy: data planning, data collection, analysis and processing, and dissemination, and the restriction of the data access. So the all those aspects are regulated on the draft of the policy. But of course, we would like to have the mechanism, the formal mechanism of the data acquisition, data processing and analysis, and dissemination regulation. Slide, please. This is the explanation of the types, standard, master reference, and metadata. The type of disaster data, disaster risk data, the event, the impact, and the financial loss related to the economic impact. And the standard underlies and certain data consists of the concept, definition, classification, size, and unit, master reference, a code obtained from the reference used to share the disaster data. So we would like to have an unique identify numbers for each event. So it will make things easier when we would like to share the data across the institution. And the metadata in collecting disaster data process should complete it with the metadata. The one disaster metadata should consist of statistical activity, variable, and indicator. Slide, please. So this is the relevant institution or entities that could participate, could contribute the on the establishment, on the updating the one disaster data in Indonesia. Governmental institution from the national to the subnational level, and the community, academician, academics, practitioners, and etc., and also the society. So we open the possibility, of course, relate with the reliability of the data owned by each entities that could be included to ensure the reliability data that we will produce later on. Slide, please. And the last chapter at the draft of the policy is the advisory, means the training, monitoring, evaluation, and assessment. The advisors of the policy implementation later on, of course, related with the statistical matters. It should be the National Statistical Agency. Related with the geospatial data will be the National Geospatial Agency, and related with the financial data, economic loss, and everything related with the financial things, that should be Ministry of Finance. And here the some mechanism related with the monitoring and assessment and disaster data custodians. Next slide. I think I have complete. Okay, what next? So we expect in the next few months, before in this year, we will be able to promulgation of the regulation of the Indonesia One Disaster Data. And then in parallel, currently we also develop the Indonesia One Disaster Data Portal, including the BNPB, the National Disaster Management Agency, and the Indonesian Statistical Agency Data Exchange Protocol. So we expect that the exchange data, the sharing data mechanism could be directly machine-to-machine protocol, not only between the BNPB, not only between the Disaster Management Agency with the Statistical Agency, but also with the other agencies that also own some disaster-related data. In example, the Ministry of Agriculture, Ministry of Marine Affairs, Ministry of Public Works, and so on. And as a pilot project establishment of the One Disaster Data Forum, we currently initiate the such a forum at 3 provinces that we expect it could be upscale, have a robust conclusion, robust method that we obtain from these 3 provinces. By this planning, I conclude my talk, and I think next slide. Okay, I complete my talk, and I hope it could share some insights with the process we have now in Indonesia, and I'm very welcome with the question and discussion. Thank you. I return to you, Pak Puji.
Madam Chair.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Abdul. And then hopefully our members got very comprehensive information about Indonesia one disaster data. And actually, we don't have this question and answer session, but if someone have any question or comments, please raise your hand. Yeah. Fuji, do you have any comments or question?
Oh, not for me, from other participants, please.
Yeah. Any questions or comments regarding the presentation? So I don't see anyone raises their hand. So I would like to thank
There's one from
Dr.
Bangladesh.
Oh yeah, yeah. Please.
Yes. Good afternoon. Good morning. My name is Kaji. One question I'm trying to understand that how they're synchronizing with the administrative data with the regular collecting by the different ministries and the national disaster management institutes, how they're synchronizing, because of that challenges we are facing, that each of the ministries collecting regular data, the statistic department not collecting the regular data. So they are doing it in the frequency, like as in Bangladesh, after 5 years, they're consolidating something. But we need some of the regular mechanism with that interaction with the ministries and NDMO, how it could be do something. What is the experience of Indonesia on that? Thanks.
Can I answer directly?
Yes.
Yeah, sure. Dr. Abdul, yes.
Okay.
Yes, please,
So
go
thank
ahead.
you for the question. That's also the big challenge for us in Indonesia, where the related agencies and ministries have their own regulation on collecting data related with their own authority and their own field. So the Indonesian One Disaster Data Forum could be one of the solutions. So in this forum, we discuss what could be integration of the data one to another, and what could be shared and what could not be shared, cannot be shared. So we are trying to discuss under the Indonesian One Disaster Data Forum, and also this disaster-related data statistics owned by different ministries. It should be integrated into the national statistical data. So one, it should be integrated into the national statistical data system. Then I think the data could be more easy to manage. That's the thing that currently we are initiating in Indonesia. And of course, it's still one of the ongoing process and learning, but I think we can move forward by having that sort of forum and also the national statistical data system. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Abdul. So,
if I may add, Madam Chair.
Of course, yes, please go ahead.
Adding to the explanation of Dr. Mohari, Kazibai, from my brother from Bangladesh. There are three mechanisms that Dr. Mohari has mentioned. Number one, that on periodical basis, most likely every year, the One Disaster Data Forum that was mentioned by Dr. Mohari will pull together a collective data planning. In such data planning, the forum that consists of the agencies under leadership of BNPB would determine out of this universe of data, which one that will be the priority for that year, right? And which one are regular that you mentioned earlier, Kasibai. And that will be the blueprint of the disaster statistics for the year. Number two is a standard that was mentioned earlier. Sure, there are agricultural data that is specific to agriculture, but there are also elements that pertain to disaster, and that would be agreed to be formed in a certain standard. And then the third one is protocol. in which then the unit of the data itself then be calibrated with a pipeline that will allow the exchange of data. So at that point, the data will already be conversion and hopefully, inshallah, machine to machine. Maybe I hope that that's additional information would make it complete. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Puji. So if there is no any question, I would like to thank Dr. Muhari for sharing your country's policy content on disaster-related statistics, Indonesia One Disaster Data. So let me move to our next session. It will be the workshop, and then Mr. Puji Pujana will facilitate our next session. And now I would like to invite Mr. Puji Pujana to start the workshop. Over to you, Puji. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to Dr. Muhari for that very substantive sharing. And as I said earlier, ladies and gentlemen, I requested you to pay attention to the presentation because that presentation will become the starting point of our workshop, right? Essentially now, I hope you would then associate your own country situation with the premise of the workshop today, that many of our countries do have the intention, have the portfolio, but we don't have the umbrella policy. So the workshop today is try to answer those questions. If we agree, now that we agree disaster statistics is important, now that we agree everybody have role to play, what would be the umbrella policy that will catalyze that movement? Okay, the Secretariat will be dividing us into 3 subgroups. Right? Group number 1, maybe you'd like to take note on your paper. 3 breakout rooms, correct? The participant will provide answers to the following questions. Okay, the first assignment is that as soon as you get to the breakout room, very quickly you should appoint or force someone, depending on how friendly you are in your group, to be the reporter, because it's very crucial, right? Group number 1 will be accompanied by Madam Chair. Aruna will be in group 1, Maria in group 2, and myself in group 3. Now, as you see on the chat, let me read for you. Group number 1, if you happen to be in group number 1 later, together with Aruna, you will be asking, look at your own country situation and look into Dr. Muhari's presentation. If you are to develop that kind of catalytic policy, what is it that you want to be there? Dr. Muhari is talking about the principles, the standard and all that. But what is it in your group that you think need to be there? You can refer to the presentation if you like. But essentially, group 1 is answering what need to be in the policy, right? If you don't have the answer, ask Madam Chair, she might have the answer. Right? Group number 2 with Maria will be asking about the how. How do we go about developing this policy? Now, you and I appreciate that each and every country have different legal processes. We understand that. Some of your government are parliamentarian, some are presidential, some are maybe, for God knows, maybe it's military, power, and each have their own rhythm and process. But if you think about the basic steps, what are those? What should move first? Move what the next step, and so on, right? I think that should be a basic question. Maria will be there with you. And the third one is the best group, because they will be coming with me. We'll be asking, if we want to do this kind of policy, right, what will be the determining factors? What would be the supportive to this work? And what will be the challenges, right? And I think at the end of the discussion, we should be able to isolate what kind of support would you need from one another in this technical working group. For example, Mongolia. Well, I think we have an issue with the data standard. Or maybe Susil in Nepal said, I think the most difficult will be the financing, right? And then we look around in this group. For example, Vivian in the Philippines has been talking about disaster expenditure. That would be resources eventually. Okay. So with that, let me repeat. Group 1 with Madam Chair, you're talking about what are the core elements of the policy, what need to be there. Group number 2 with Maria will talk about what are the steps, the process they have to go through. And group number 3 to assess what will be the supporting factor and the challenges. So I will see you in about 40 minutes from now. Don't forget to appoint your rapporteur. See you later. We will automatically divide it into 3 groups. Right, Maria?
Yes, Puji. Ing will be our support from ESCAP, will be the one who will transport us into our respective groups.
And hopefully transporting back.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, in 7 seconds.
Hello, my name is Ing. I would like to know who's not yet been assigned to the breakout session. Is there anybody still in the main room, please? Hello, Mr. Setio.
Yeah. Yes.
May I know which group you were in, please, so I can reassign you? Was it group 3?
I'm not sure. I just.
Oh, all right. Let me see the name. You're in group number 2, so I will assign you back to group number 2.
Okay then. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yang 10 ya 2020 kemarin itu kan masih
Okay, we are back. Arunya, Aruna?
Yes,
Group
Puja, I
three,
can hear you.
group three is back.
Yes. Yes, so I think one more group is missing or rejoining.
Isipin mo, masasagot mo na to. Designated statistics, yung mga survey.
It's not connected.
I'm sorry?
We're in the meeting.
Yes, we are now in plenary. Sorry.
So some of groups is one group is still continuing the discussion, I believe.
Yeah, I think the group 3 has to wrap up your discussions.
Group 3 is already in the house. Group 1 is already in the house. Maria, your group is back?
Yeah, my group is back.
Okay, then all of us are here. All right, so Madam Chair, if I can just continue.
Yes.
I would like to call on our Group 1 rapporteur to share the findings and the response to the question, what would be the core element of this policy impetus, legal framework, or whatever you call it? Can I have a Group 1, please? Who is the speaker, Group 1?
I am. Hi.
Litya,
Hello,
Bulan.
everyone. So the key things that came out of the discussions by Group 1, and thank you again to the members who provided input. The policy needed to reflect that the high level support for the policy itself. There was specific reference to the political will and buy-in, including the necessary legislations that actually underpinned or was overarching the policy itself. As part of the work, the involvement of beneficiaries and data users, there was a reflection on the need for greater awareness, and this is really throughout the drafting into the actual policy development and then the implementation of it. As part of that drafting process, however, there was also a need to first understand what exists in terms of the data's challenges. And this is in regards to social data, environmental data, as well as technical capability around it. The policy needed clear mandates, who is responsible, and how do they then coordinate with the national statistics offices. There is a need for data standards on the type of data and the source. And the particular reference was the responsibility of the line ministries to provide that metadata. The policy also needed to include a definition of what was in scope. There was a specific reference from Thailand on that in order to strengthen the policies related to disaster stats, data integration with sectors is needed. So the policy needed to actually facilitate that ability to share data across agencies or between agencies. Of note was also that some of the technical working groups that have already been established have actually been mandated through resolutions. And this was something that was picked up as a potential learning for all of us here. And in the Philippines, this technical working group on disaster stats was basically established under this IAC, the Interagency Committee for Environment and Natural Resources stats resolution, which also provides a platform for discussion and discussions around the issues and the challenges, and also reviewing some of the techniques applied. There was a note that, even though we're trying to work, integratedly across the agencies, the Maldives reflection around the official national statistics is actually compiled by the NSO, and there was a need for the policy to actually, and to note that. That though there are responsibilities by other agencies, that there needed to be an official acknowledgement of who was, responsible for that official statistics. Countries also noted the need to be able to develop or construct a framework for that was relevant to themselves, to their own country. Whether this is part of the policy or whether this is an adjoining document to the policy that talks to the implementation of it. The protocols with the National Statistics Office was highlighted, particularly between the National Disaster Management Agency with stats, and this is something from learning from Mongolia, where one of the core elements of the policy needed to talk to that coordination of the relevant organizations and agencies that actually collect data and then transfer that to the NSO, noting that other agency data is needed to complement that information. Thank you.
Vinaka, Litya. So thank you for group 1. I noted very quickly there are 4 key elements from group 1. One is that you need to have very clear and authoritative mandate to do this policy. That could be legislation, that could be presidential decree, could be resolution. Anything that have authority that mandated the work. Number 2, the definition of the responsibility and division of labors among stakeholders. The third one is the involvement of the data producers and data users. And the fourth one are the technical frameworks that include the standards, the data sources, definition protocols, and so on. So these are 4 core elements that need to be in the policy that will bring impetus to the configuration of the Disaster Management Agency, NSO, and other agencies at national and local level. All right. So thank you to group 1. Anybody would like to add into this comment from group 2, from fellow group 1? Anyone? Okay. Group 2, do you have any input to group 1? Disagreement, additional information? Group 3, anything to add? Okay, everybody shy. I'll count to 3. If nobody adds, then let's go to group 1. 1, 2, 3. So group 1, good to go. Can I move to group 2, please? Maria, who is the speaker, group 2?
Yes, we have Mr. Kazi Rahman from Bangladesh.
Kazi bhai, Assalamualaikum.
Yes.
Come on.
Thank you for the group have been discussed a lot on the different issues of the triggering the policy, initiation of the policy. Some country have the policy, some country don't have any policy. But we see the most of the country have the act, whether it is Disaster Management Act or Statistical Act. Sometimes we need to be a marriage of the Disaster Management Act and the Statistic Act together with that coherence, data integration, all those things. So that integration is basically happening when we have the very clear policy, and that policy development that's differ country to country, like as the Indonesia or the Philippines. Philippines is something that initiated by the BNPB. So they are the National Disaster Management Authority started that. In Bangladesh case, we discussed something that who are the custodian of data. We see that the Statistic Office is custodian because of the 2013 Act. So that the whatever custodian we have, but the process is similar to all the country. We need a policy. So have a small group of technical people with the different ministries come together and discuss something that where is the hindering to the regular data, disaster data, because the country is a high vulnerable to the climate related disaster. So every year we need 1 or 2 disaster happen. So who will collect the data? What is the method? What is the standard? So that need to be very clear from the policy. So the policy need to be discussion with the technically, in the different group, whether it is in Bangladesh case, there is the information management working group, or the technical working group of the SDG, or there is a UN data group, all those things. So that some way we need to have that discussion on the policy. If we have the policy and mandated organization, then we could engage with the National Statistics Office for the regular collection and update of the data. So there is a three area we see something that the playing key role in the disaster data. One is the NDMO, who have the disaster management role, disaster risk management role, and the National Statistics Office, who have all the data, especially the vulnerability related data. They are not the special related data in Bangladesh case. So that they are the most of the data they are basically holding. They are the authority, the pen holder. And there is a line ministry, couple of technical line ministry like as health, agriculture, and other thing. So that the point of interaction is the policy could be the point of interaction with the existing data landscape as well as existing legal framework. That could be. But very interesting success from the BNPB, from the Indonesia, that could be very interesting, that how they have developed something, and that is the baseline could be the Asia Pacific, that I did not see other country, but very clearly the Indonesia have developing something that could be followed. That discussion could happen, and even could facilitate that discussion with the national stakeholder. That is very. Thank you. Anything, Maria, you want to add?
Nothing more. I think you've said everything. I mean, if our group mates have something more or something to add.
Go ahead. Anyone from group 2 who disagree with Kazi? Kazi Bhai? Or do you like to add some more information? Okay. From group 1, Lithia and friends, is there anything you'd like to add with regard to how do we go about building this policy? Is there anything you'd like to add? Group 3? See, this group are very polite. They never disagree. Let me take note, Akasi Bhai. Thank you for the report. So first, it looks like Lithia. Please, Lithia.
I think the experience that was shared with us during our discussions from Thailand, around that establishment of that working group, actually engaging meaningfully, and having the clear mandate on what to do. I think that was quite an encouraging one.
Thank you.
All right, so we take note of that. Anybody else would like to add? All right, so what I get from group number 2, number 1, regardless of what, every country is different, as Kasi Bhai is saying, but generally speaking, what we need is some sort of initiation of the process. It cannot grow naturally. It has to be initiated somewhere, all right? And what he was talking about, that initiation or trigger could come from urgency, very large disaster, all right? Could also be a compulsion or obligation or instruction from Ministry of Planning, for example, or commitment to regional commitment, to global commitment. We have to produce statistics, we have to report to Sendai. All of this could be trigger that then create this momentum among agencies, right? But that alone will not work because that's only initiation. The second one, what I heard is that the designation of the core agency, if you like, Kasi Bhai is talking about at least NDMO and NSO would jointly agree to get married. Somebody is talking about the marriage. If they still don't look at one another, I don't think it is going to happen. So they have to at least not to hate each other. All right. And only then they can bring other people to the gathering and to talk about this. That involve, and then next to that is what Lithia was saying from Thailand. Then we need to put this group into motion. sometimes in the form of technical working group, sometimes a task force, sometimes an ad hoc group or something that become an engine of the movement of this policy. But necessarily, as Litya was saying, this group need to have a clear mandate, right? Very clear what the objective is. Sometimes it's time bound. So these are the basic movement, and of course the last one that Kasibai has not added to that is to enter into the policy making procedures. All right, the proposal of the content and going through the maybe the policy body and the ministry, maybe parliament. I don't know. Each country is different, but there is a machine that produces those policies, right? Very good. That's group number 2. So we have been dealing with what need to be in the policy, how to go about it, how do you start this in your country, all right? And Kazi was saying that it's good to look at the example, all right? Sometimes this example happened like in Indonesia, sometimes in the Philippines. People have gone through different process, and clearly different type of country would need to have different kind of case study to learn with. Okay. All right. Now, group 3, please.
Okay. Thank you very much, Dr. Fuji. I'm sorry I cannot put on my video. I asked the secretariat if they can put. Anyway, so for group 3, the questions assigned to us. Number 1, how do you bring disaster statistics in the country, which is still starting to develop disaster statistics? And once developed, possibly how do we maintain them or sustain them? The second question is, what are the perceived challenges or the factors that hinder in developing such a policy on disaster statistics? So on the first question, we have identified 3 major items. Number 1, we need to establish the legal frameworks. Number 2, the institutional frameworks and the partnership frameworks. So on the legal framework, just an example for the Philippines, the Philippine Statistics Authority, through the Republic Act 10625, we are mandated to coordinate all the statistics available in the country. So we are the authority in terms of the statistics, and we have the highest policy making body in terms of the statistical matter. So we have the PSA board. So these are examples of the legal frameworks that we have. And of course, second, the institutional framework. We need to define within the agencies who are the stakeholders of that has all this interest, concern on disaster statistics. We have a long list of agencies, but who are really these agencies that we can partner with, pull them together? So when we talk of this agency, they come in different areas. These agencies are compilers of statistics, of disaster statistics. Second, these agencies are the data producers of these disaster statistics. And the third one is that they are the users of disaster statistics to develop policies, programs with regards to disaster management. So these are the 3 levels of the agencies. So we define first who are these agencies. Second is to advocate to them the importance why we are developing disaster statistics. So it's just like an economic statistics, very popular traditional statistics. You know, when you talk of gross domestic product, you talk about economic measures of the country. For the disaster statistics, if you tell them about disaster statistics, how they will look at this, how they will show this. So we need to have more advocacies in terms of these agencies, these stakeholders, to appreciate more, to understand more, so that this way they will participate in the bilateral meetings and so on. No? It's not only the stakeholder, the agencies, but of course, we need to entice, encourage public agencies or government and also the private agencies. Now, once you meet with them, tell them exactly what do you intend to do in terms of developing the disaster. Then call them possibly in a big forum. It's like an inception forum, and to inform everyone, announce that we will develop this, and this is very important, and these are some of the importance. And later on, lead them to something like what's next after this. Should you talk about national roadmap, the work plan? We are on the first year of developing disaster statistics. What do you expect in the next 3 years? What do we expect in the next 5 years, and so on? So national roadmap is very important so that all these agencies will align their activities and programs towards this roadmap. But what is also very critical is to do an assessment and holdings of all these available data. We know from experience of the Philippines, all data are already available in the different agencies. It's just a matter of looking at them individually for disaster and put them together in one framework. We have the DRSF framework, the Sendai framework, SDG framework, and so on. Put them in one framework, populate this framework with the data that are available. For sure, there are a lot of data gaps. We are still developing this, but seeing them in one framework and database, in one database to be accessible by all these agencies. It's not yet perfect. The country is still doing this for the first time during the first year, but partnership, we need to emphasize. We need to meet with them regularly. If you meet them now and after 5 years you meet them again, it's not successful. You cannot expect them to do work for you. They will forget you. So what I'm saying is regularly meet with them, talk to them bilaterally, and the interagency committee or the technical working groups is very, very important. This is the experience from the Philippines.
Okay.
You have the statistical development plan. Once everybody understands the disaster statistics, then you come up with a plan. This is like a roadmap. What are the activities in the next 5 years and the next 10 years, and regularly monitor them.
Okay. Can we shift to the challenges? Vivian, yes. Let's move to the challenges.
The second question, what are the challenges or the factors that will hinder developing such a policy for disaster statistics? Of course, number one, the statistical office as a lead agency to coordinate all these agencies should develop that expertise. They should be technically trained on disaster statistics. Disaster statistics is something new. So from here, of course, we need like ESCAP, our partners in international agencies to help us, like this one, technical working group, ESCAP technical working group on disaster statistics. So we need to be equipped technically how we go along with developing disaster statistics. Second, are the resources available for us to develop disaster statistics? By resources, I mean the manpower, or are there people in your office dedicated to do disaster statistics? So you need to assign full-time staff, or else this is a disaster if you do not have staff. So it will not proceed. No? So you need to have resources. you need budget financially from the government. So these are these are some of the things that are very essential. Challenges, of course, it is very important to really the appreciation part of the disaster statistics. This is something I think where guidelines has to be done. We need guidelines, possibly ESCAP or UNSC and so on. So for countries to follow, there should be some recommendations and so on. I think we are already starting on this, the guidelines and the training and some availability of resources, availability of experts on disaster that are going to the countries for country visits and training and so on. And then confidentiality. Yeah, there are, these are, we saw this as a challenge. Not all people are very much willing to divulge the information because of the confidentiality. In the Philippines, we have the Privacy Act, and we are governed by this law. So it is easier for us to do that. So I think that's all. We have other members. I think we have Aileen and Polaris if they want to add. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Vivian. Anyone from Group 3 would like to add? Okay, the silence means the approval. So what I get from Vivian is that some of the supporting factors, if you in your country would like to start this, one is that you need to come up with legal framework to identify what are the regulation, legislation that pertains to this work. Number two is to put together institutional framework, which is mentioned repeatedly by Lydia and by Kazi. Who is responsible for what? And the third one, partnership framework, which is framed both in terms of who play and do what, but also to accomplish what task by when in terms of roadmap, right? So these are some of the supporting factors. And then some of the challenges, it was mentioned, number one is the lack of knowledge, because disaster statistics is a new thing, it's a new baby. We need to have knowledge. Sometimes we need to have input from the regional framework, like regional technical working group and so on. Number two is resources. This is a new undertaking, not necessarily being budgeted by government. We need to have some catalytic resources and also to sustain the movement. And third one, challenges in terms of technicalities that has something to do with data definition, data confidentiality, liability that attached to the data, so that people are not willingly giving the data, right? Sometimes it's a hardware, software thing that people cannot have a handshake on in terms of data. So those are some of the key considerations from group number 3. So let me just recap very quickly, Madam Chair and ladies and gentlemen. We have gone through the workshop. We have taken forward the issues that we have dealt for the last 12 months into a set of consolidated knowledge in 40 minutes, which is amazing, right? And we hope that Secretariat will consolidate our output and will share it to us in the form of email or something like that, or even guidelines eventually, so that it will become something of use. I would like to end it here, considering the time. I would like to thank Lydia, Kazi, and Vivian for reporting the result of the group discussion. And I would like to pass it over to the chairperson. Madam Chair, over to you.
Thank you, Puji. Thank you, Puji, for your excellent facilitations, and then thank you for our reporters and then also our members for your very useful comments and then inputs on this policy on disaster-related statistics. So now we are close to the end of today's meeting and we are run out of time. Before closing the meeting, I would like to ask Maria to provide brief information of the next workshop and any housekeeping announcements or any other businesses from the Secretariat. Thank you.
Yes, thank
Maria,
you
over
much,
to you.
yeah, thank you very much, Yuna. I would just like to share something. I would like to ask for to put up a slide. And this is just an update from Bangladesh because we have 7 members from Bangladesh who are unable to join us this afternoon because they're having a parallel activity. So I'd just like to share what that is. And right now they're conducting a workshop with regards to the capacity building for generating gender responsive environment data. And this has been ongoing since Monday up to today. And some of the important topics of the workshop include gender mainstreaming with regards to generating the metadata and what the indicators are for with regards to SDGs, and also data sharing, the importance of data sharing and coordination among ministries, officials of different ministries, and also the different organizations. So I think in the future, we can ask our colleagues from Bangladesh with regards to the results of these activities that are very, very important, also in disaster-related statistics with regards to gender mainstreaming. So that's all, Ms. Arjuna. And I would just like to inform everyone that our next month's meeting will be a second workshop, and this will be about a very interesting one, also like this one, and this will be about what are the scope of the scope of disaster-related statistics that the basic disaster-related statistics that the countries need to produce based on the DRSF. So I think that's all, Arjuna. Back to you.
Thank you, Maria. If there are none, before I declare this meeting closed, I would like to let you know that our next meeting is scheduled on Wednesday, as usual, the 28th of October, and then please mark the date on your calendar so we won't miss our workshop, which will be very interesting, as Maria promised. So with this, I would like to close the technical working group meeting, and thank you all for your active participation, and then see you next month.